interviewed by Jim and Brett on the DATcast, which is a podcast all about DAT. It's the best podcast. Matthias has been on it. There are 2 episodes, and you should be on it too. So you should listen to it, and then if you want to talk about any work you're doing with DAT in the peer-to-peer world, you should check it out. And then if you like email, you can always join our list. So that is my quick Code for Science and Society updates. People are putting in announcements, and that's awesome. I'm not going to read them out loud for the sake of time, because we have so many amazing speakers that we only have 5 hot minutes for each speaker to speak. And if you remember from last time, I will stop you. And then you get 2 to 3 minutes to take questions from the audience. So the way that this works is that there's a slight delay on the Air Mozilla broadcast. So as you start speaking, if you audience members have questions, just start putting them in the Etherpad. And then when the speaker is done, I'll start with whatever questions are in there. And if there aren't questions right then, feel free to put them in the Etherpad or reach out to the speaker after. Does that sound good to everyone? Thumbs up? Okay. So we're really excited today. The speakers are listed on line 46. We have Matthias. Matthias, can you wave? Matthias is a lead DAT developer, and he's also working on the Beaker team. We have Yash, who worked on a DAT implementation in Rust. Yash is frozen, but he's here. We have Hugh Isaacs, who spoke at last week's peer-to-peer web summit and peer-to-peer web event in New York about the peer-to-peer web and zombies, which was really awesome. Naomi Penfold from eLife is going to talk about running a hackathon that was described as the most productive hackathon that many people had ever been to. So she's going to talk about what she did, what she learned. John Gasnock could not join us today. And then we have Chris Rizzo and Georgia Bullen from Measurement Lab and Measure the Internet. Oh, somebody is... I think it's... I'm going to mute somebody. Okay. Aurelia,
I can't unmute myself.
Aurelia, can you mute him? Sorry.
I'll try.
Okay. I was trying to. This happens on all the calls. We watch Danielle mess around with technology and not understand how to use it. So, and then we'll have also updates from Nakomi Bentley at Stencilla and Rick Smith at Science Fair. So let's get going. We're going to start with Macintosh. His section is on line 98. I think he's going to talk about HyperDB. And we're ready to go when you are. You can take some notes.
Yeah, cool. Am I unmuted now?
You're unmuted. You're good. Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any UI. That's why I'm sorry. I've been working on this thing called HyperDB, which is our collaborative, scalable, distributed database. And it's basically a multi-writer database that allows you to make a database that multiple people can put data into, to put it in a simple way as I can put it. And this is basically the foundation of a larger project we've been working on that we like to call multi-writer DAT, which makes that more than one person can write to a DAT. It's 95% of the work, basically. And it's been the culmination of, that's a quit crying next to me. Guess they don't like peer-to-peer. We're gonna try to move away. It's basically been a culmination of a year's work that I just released the first stable version of, I think it was last week. So that's very exciting. It's called version 3.0, which if you're familiar with Node.js, it usually means that it's a stable around then. It's not 1.0 kind of community. And it's been a lot of hard work to get there, and it's super exciting. It basically means that we have the final big step done for doing any kind of collaboration on that, which is super exciting for me. I think that's like the next big step for the DAT protocol in general. If you've seen Jim Pick's shopping list demo and to-do list, and he's also built a wiki on top of it. So he's done a lot of really interesting demos already. As a scaling test, I put in Wikipedia. It was really fun to see how that scaled and worked really well. And it's really fun to have a big decentralized database that scales well and that you can update parts of without having to download all of it. So basically, the small selling point is that it's a database that you can put in like millions or billions or trillions of keys or files, and then you can choose only to get the data out of it that you want in a peer-to-peer fashion. So that's super exciting. That's kind of what takes it apart from a lot of other stuff. So it's like database is really, really good for hosting tons of data and then just getting the small part out that you want. And then it's also really, really good at allowing multiple people to update values at once without coordinating. And there's a bunch of semantics for that, to making that work consistently. So super exciting stuff. So that's out now, and you can use it today. And the next step is we're taking that and putting that into that, so that you can use it as a file system that you would normally, but have multiple people update your file system at once, which kind of turns that into like a peer-to-peer Dropbox, I would say. So that's super exciting. So that's my quick update. So it's available now. You can try it out on npm install hyperdb, and there's a README in the repo, and a ton of really, really good contributors. It was like really a multi-person effort to get us where it is today, and a lot of hard work. So I'm super excited about it, and I hope other people are also.
That's awesome. Thanks, Matthias. Thanks for the update. And even the Screaming Child was not so much. It looks like we have a question coming in. So I'll wait a minute and we can answer that question, and then we'll let you go. Matthias is in the middle of an event in Berlin, a Dat and Beaker work night. So thanks again for skipping out on that for a minute. Okay, so somebody's asking, what's the most interesting use case you've heard of for HyperDB?
It's actually that's a really good question. The most interesting use case is, like always, all the things people do with it so far. It's very new that I hadn't even thought of. So there's already the Cabal chat app that I don't know if somebody else is talking about, but it's a really interesting project where somebody made basically a multi-writer peer-to-peer IRC on top of HyperDB. And I really like it because they basically made it without asking me any questions with close to 0 docs. So that kind of like validates that the project is easy enough to use that somebody can like kind of skim the source code and get it working. So that's a really big validation for me that we're going in the right direction at least. So that's like, for me, as both a technical and actual use case, really exciting right now. And then also, I learned this yesterday, there's an art project being built on top. That's one of the things in general I'm excited about with that, all the art things happening. I don't know how we got involved with that, but it's really awesome and it's really cool. And so like amazing stuff people are doing. But there's basically an art project being done with presenting a peer-to-peer database in Moscow at the Modern Museum of Art in Moscow, where they showcase like collaborative art. And that's all built on HyperDB also, by collaborators. That's going on end of June to July. So that's I don't know, that just blew my mind also. So a lot of really interesting things.
Really cool. We've got one more question. Can you do one more of these questions and then we'll move on to the next speaker,
no
just
problem.
in the interest of time? Okay. And while you're doing that, I'm going to find a link to that art project because it's really exciting.
The only link right now.
It's in Russian.
So you gotta speak Russian. My girlfriend speaks Russian. That helps.
So let's check out one more of these questions. So someone's asking about ideas for encryption in HyperDB.
I don't know the complete context of the question, but so that project by itself is already end-to-end encrypted when you do replication. But of course, when you put values into the database, they're stored in plain text. So basically, if you have access to the database, you can read data out. Actually doing some experiments recently, they kind of still mad sciencey and not stable at all, with something called homomorphic encryption, which is really interesting to me, where you can store values in the database and then do computation on them, but still have them be encrypted, which is kind of mind-bending. And I did some actual experiments with it, and it works quite well. So that's something I want to work with more right now. Then there's also been a lot of talk in the chat, in the DAT IRC channel recently, about how to better store data in there encrypted by itself, just with more classic encryption methods. And that's probably something somebody will work on. It's not my main focus right now because I just want to ship it in DAT itself, but it would definitely be on my list of cool things to do afterwards.
Cool. All right. Well, that's really exciting. There's one more question in here. It looks like someone asked and then also maybe answered the question, but I want to move on to Yash to keep the call moving. So thank you so much, Matthias, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And you can find Matthias on the internet to ask him more questions if you have them. So Yash, are you here?
Cool. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. So Yash has been working on a Rust implementation of DAT, and take it away. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, hey everyone. I'm Yash. I used to about like a year ago, I was working on something called that desktop, and then we ran out of money. We kind of dropped off the map for a bit, and like 2 months ago, I managed to get a grant to start working on peer-to-peer video in the browser for 6 months, which I started working on. And like couple of weeks in, I was like, uh-oh, I don't think we can really pull it off. So I started pivoting like, okay, cool. So what's some cool that stuff that we can pull off that's high impact and like kind of interesting? And a big problem with that, well, it's not really a problem, just like a constraint, is that everything's written in JavaScript. And while JavaScript runs in many places, it doesn't run everywhere. So I was like, you know what would be cool? If I tried to port little bits and pieces into like a lower level programming language, something like C or C++. And I ended up using Rust, and I've just been experimenting initially. But so far, I'm 3/4 the way of implementing hypercore and still like have to hit a roadblock. So the experiments are going quite well, I'd say. So yeah, that's more or less what I'm up to. My roadmap right now is so I've got 6 months of grant funded. I'm about 2 months in, so almost done with hypercore. The basic parts, so getting data, writing data into a hypercore and reading data out of a hypercore works with persisting both the memory and disk. We can also verify that all the trees are correct. The verification method works, seems to work. Still need to do a bit more testing. Then the step after this will be to get a better picture of how we want to start doing some networking, then probably get a basic TCP version working, eventually create a C API, and then eventually get a proof of concept that we can actually run this on mobile. So the people that I'm doing this grant for will be like, okay, cool, I guess this works towards getting peer-to-peer video actually working. Yeah, and that should probably fill up the next 16 weeks, I think.
All right, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Can you tell or drop the link in later for the name of the funding agency? I know it was a German grant, but other people who might be based in Berlin or Germany might be interested in checking that out for funding their projects.
It's the Prototype Fund based in Germany. So if you live in Germany, you can apply to this fund, and they help you apply at the German government. And I got lucky that I got in.
All right, awesome. So if I don't see any more questions appearing, we're going to move it on. But I think that's a really exciting thing that Yash is working on, and I think somebody just rejoined the call. So, oh, hi Nakomi, you made it. Everyone's been having video issues today, so so if I seem distracted, it's because I'm just hoping everyone can get on and we can keep talking. So I'm gonna move it on, but thank you so much, Yash, for coming and giving us your update. And I do see a question coming in on line 151 for you. So why don't do you want to answer that question, Levon?
All right, cool. So I'm saying, is the structure aiming to have similar modules as the JavaScript implementation? Actually, it's pretty similar so far. I've just more or less been asking Matthias like, yo, what's a good module to implement next? And I've been doing that initially. And now I'm just working on hypercore and slightly starting to deviate a bit more from the JavaScript implementation, but it's quite similar. Very much the same module names also. It's been working great so far. So, you know, yeah. I guess the very short answer is yes. It's similar.
All right, great.
So
thank you so much, Yash. I think you're at the same event where Matthias is, so you probably have to jump off. We're having a little bit of a dot-heavy call in the front end so that the people in Europe can go on and have their evening fun. And if there might be some more questions that come in, and I'll get them to Yash if he has to jump off. Next up on the call is Hugh Isaacs. Hugh, are you here? I don't hear you or see you anymore. So, Hugh.
I'm here. I'm hearing that I can't be seen. I can see myself.
I see you.
Oh.
I see you now. All right, we're ready. So, Hugh jumped in at the last minute to fill in for another speaker, John Gasnick, who couldn't make it, and we're so excited to have him. He talked a little bit about DAT at the last peer-to-peer meetup that was at the School for Poetic Computation in New York City this past Saturday. And I'm not sure if the live stream for that has been recorded and is now available, but it was a really fun event. And Hugh gave a great talk about zombies. So he's going to talk a little bit about his work and take it away.
Well, honestly, I don't know if my work weighs up the same way, but basically I've just been focused on trying to just get like I don't know how to put it, like the word out there in a sense, to make sure people kind of think to build with the ability for these protocols and these things like that, and especially that to work offline. So my focus was mainly just to, I used the zombie apocalypse talk to basically get the idea across for people, like in scenarios where there are, hurricane-stricken areas or areas without power or well, with some power, with limited power, areas where, people are limited on networking and communication and access to information and stuff like that. I was that protocols like that are great for, helping with those issues. So, I gave that talk, that the reaction to be so positive. I really didn't. And yeah, and outside of that, I've made a Chrome extension for viewing DAT sites in Chrome with a desktop application that can be used with it. So it's like a proxy basically. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say on that so much, other than this is my first time doing this.
That's okay. We're happy to have you. The calls are always really fun and not formal, and so we got a question coming in. Did you learn anything interesting from the folks who heard your talk?
Yeah, actually, there was quite a few interesting things that did come up. Especially NYC Mesh. I've been in love with their work, and
I'll put a link to that in the thing.
They've been like expanding greatly. I didn't know how far into the Bronx they were working, and I live in the Bronx, so I was super happy to hear about that, and I was chatting with them quite a bit. I probably was like bothering them. But yeah, there was quite a bit. Honestly, the biggest thing I kind of learned were just the perspectives a lot of people had on like the zombie apocalypse scenario that I gave was just the worst case scenario I could think of. Like, it had to be something imaginary that would like encompass so many different levels. And people after the fact, because I wasn't quite sure if everybody got the point, but after the fact, when I was just going around chatting with people, a lot of people were bringing up like, yeah, in a lot of other countries, they have had internet shutdowns, or they don't actually have like a constant connectivity like we do over here, or there's many different levels of stuff that I wasn't even. Some of it I was thinking about, and then some of it I was like, oh wow, I didn't even put it in that context, and it was a wake up call. So I was glad.
Yeah, that's awesome. I noticed in your talk you mentioned Hurricane Sandy, and if anyone was living in New York during that time, it was like a disaster scenario, and I think that probably resonated. It certainly resonated with me. I used to live in New York, and I'm sure it resonated with a lot of other people in the audience, because it's not like these things don't happen. They do. Someone else is asking about whether you've talked to disaster emergency response teams so they can plan to deploy the tech.
I haven't, I never even thought to speak with emergency folk. Honestly, the biggest thing I was focused on with the talk wasn't even so much emergency tech as much as it was to make sure that our regular technology worked in these scenarios. That's something I really should get onto though, as there's probably someone I've met so far that specializes in that or is in that area. So
Yeah, it would be cool to talk to NYC Mesh or some of the other community people. All right. Well, if there are no more questions coming in, I just want to thank you for joining us last minute and talking a little bit about what he's interested in and how he's working with the DAP project. And if you can drop the link for the Chrome extension stuff in here, that would be awesome. And we'll wait for the link from your talk and post that when it's available, because it was pretty cool. Awesome. So we're at 11:24, and we have a bunch of other speakers left, and we've got 34 people in the Etherpad hanging out and watching the talk, so that's really fun. And our next speaker is Naomi Penfold. Now, Naomi hosted a hackathon at eLife in Cambridge, where Joe and I went to it, and we made a cool little thing called Project Trackbook. But what was really exciting for me about this event was that it wasn't your typical hackathon. So I wanted Naomi to come and talk about what she learned planning it, and how the broader community can learn from her experience. Take it away, Naomi.
Thanks, Danielle. So we've not got long to talk. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool, okay. I'm bringing a little bit of Asia into the room. That's Tsukushima Shrine from Japan, but just so you know what that is. Okay, so I put loads of notes in the Etherpad already, and I'm not going to read them out, but I wanted to bring some things to your attention. And then I've got some questions for you all to answer on line 238 at the moment. They might drop down a bit. So just very briefly, what we're doing at eLife is that we really want to, we're a life sciences journal, but we're also a technology company, and we promote open source, and we really want to push the edge on how research is communicated using modern technologies, because that industry has been very slow to adopt new things, and we really want to foster people with ideas to be able to test those ideas and bring products to life. But we're finding it quite hard to find projects that are ready to have that kind of support. So we're looking to solve that problem. And so what we thought to do was a hackathon. Now, it's been thought about before in my organization. Plenty of other people have done hackathons. So I was quite keen to do something different. So what I designed for was to make an event that prioritized for productivity and lasting productivity and inclusivity, because what we definitely didn't want to do was to hold an overnight competitive event that's aimed at students so that people can recruit or just learn coding, which is very valuable, but it's not what we needed for our space. And we didn't want to only have developers as well, which is what the word hackathon tends to appeal to. So instead we hosted the eLife Sprint, and it was 60 people in person. They worked on 14 projects in total over 2 days, just the daytime only. We did have some virtual contributions. Nakomi on the call did a major amount of work for it. Thank you. And there's some key things that we learned by doing this. So we learned that inclusivity is really hard. We kind of knew that already, and I followed some guidelines that were available from some other event organizers. Hat tip to OpenCon. But it's really hard to get people who need visas in the room, and you need a lot of time to do that, and you need to design your travel policy to support people with visa fees and things like that we didn't have ready for that. So, you know, there were failings on our part, but there were also things that worked really well. So we very deliberately tried to include participants in the programming, got them to introduce themselves at the beginning, allowed them space to reflect on what they learned at the event at the end, and the whole event basically went really well because of the people in the room. And it was really, I think it's a major learning to take away is that the quality of the people in the room and that attitude to collaboration is what makes an event work. So I'm really proud of everyone that was in the room, and I'm really impressed with what they managed to do. There are some links at the bottom so you can follow to a blog about the event and a blog roundup of all the projects there. I really recommend that you go and do what you can to contribute or support the people. You can annotate our blogs using a Hypothesis plugin, so that you can share your love for everything that's gone on there. And what's next is that we really want to try and make this last. Both the projects, the ultimate test is, are these projects something that can carry on? Because that's the kind of what we designed for. We want to help people to bring their ideas to life. So do these projects become reality? But also the community that's been fostered by this event and the event itself, I'd like to make sure that we share it as a template for people to carry on iterating on, because I learned a lot from other people. I've brought in those learnings from other conferences and hackathons I've been to, and I'd like people to be able to learn from our event too and continue to improve and to make welcoming and inclusive and productive events like this work for the communities they're designed for. So I do have some questions for you all. Thanks for listening to all that stuff. You can read much more above, and there's a blog that's going to go out about the event design as well, which I can add in here once it's out. But I've got some questions for you, which is whether you can answer in the Etherpad with some +1s and some suggestions. But I'd really like to know whether you're keen to help with improving scholarly communication on the web, and if so, how? Whether you'd like to, how do you find out about projects and events that you want to contribute to? And also whether you'd like to attend a future event like this eLife Sprint. And finally, there was a major thing that we found through our event, which is that we didn't get many applications from female developers, and I'm pretty sure there's people on the call here who have ideas for how to help with that. And I'm really keen to understand how we can do better next time. So that's also a question number 4. So please feel free to add in your answers there. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. So Naomi, instead of you taking questions, it looks like people are going to jump in and answer your questions. If anyone does have questions for Naomi, we can take them here. But if I don't see any coming in, I'm going to move us right along while people chat on the questions that she has asked us. So continue doing that. And I want to introduce Georgia and Chris from Measurement Lab. If you haven't heard of Measurement Lab, you should get excited about it, because they do a lot of really interesting work to support and protect the internet that is connecting us all right now. So I'll without further ado, take it away, Georgia and Chris.
Thanks, Danielle. I think Chris has some slides prepared, so I'm going to let him talk about that. But hi, everybody. And I think with that, he'll actually do a good intro, and then we can answer questions. So
great. I'm sharing them right now.
So,
I'll stall while you do that.
It is. I figured this out earlier with help from the Air Mozilla team. It is the 4th button. If you go to the bottom of the video screen, the little panel of buttons come up. It's the 4th one from the left.
With the like play button.
With the little play button.
With the play button. Okay, yes, perfect. Okay, let me see what I'm looking for here.
Great.
And thanks for having us, and it's great to be on the call. I'm just going to share this, and we'll put a link to it in the presentation, maybe some more links as well. But I'm going to try to go quickly, give you a brief intro to Measurement Lab, and then tell about a couple of research projects we're working on. So MLab has a mission to measure the internet, save the data, and make it easy to analyze and understand. And we're always striving to do that, but sometimes we need some help. So it's always a big job. So how do we do that? We have a partnership. The MLab is a partnership between Open Technology Institute, where Georgia and I work, Planet Lab, which is at Princeton University Computer Science Department, and Google. So we have a team primarily of those 3 institutions that work on the project. And since 2009, we've been working to provide a open source platform to host measurement tests. So different types of tests like trace routes and speed and latency measurements. And these are all conducted in a crowdsourced fashion by people in the world. And so we help maintain, along with some of our colleagues, an open distributed platform for researchers to host those tools and for consumers and people to run those tests all around the world. And this is a map from our website where we put up why did we exist? Just try to keep it moving as quickly as possible. So our goal is to advance network research and also empower people. So we mainly maintain this network of servers around the world, and then look at the data. So the reason we exist is that the open data did not exist back then, and now we have a large longitudinal data set, ongoing measurements up to millions and millions per day, thanks to open source integrations of our measurement tests. So if you go to our website, you can begin to explore that data on the data tab. We are working on making sure that that data is updated all the time, but it may not be absolutely current. But one of the things that we do is focus on how people use our data and why. And so other than just running a speed test, to find out why my internet sucks or something, we support civil society organizations who want to use our data for research and advocacy. Several national regulators, including the FCC, use our part of our platform to conduct their measurement and to assess broadband in their countries. And then increasingly, OTI, as a sort of putting on the OTI hat and taking off the measurement lab management hat, we've been engaging with public institutions like schools and libraries to bring those tools to use in the service of their institutions to better understand broadband in their schools, libraries. And so this kicked off a couple of years ago with a project that I ran. It was a pilot research project in Alexandria, Virginia, where we took our main measurement speed test and packaged it up and automated the running of it on a regular basis from within the school classrooms of several schools in Alexandria. And then we analyzed the data and produced a report, which you can find, and I'll put a link to in the Etherpad. But the main goal was to sort of iterate through and prove out this methodology. Some of our policy-focused colleagues have always advocated for the FCC to include tools in for institutions to be able to test and measure their speeds and the service they get, particularly with programs that give federal funding to schools and libraries to do so. So this was a kind of way to start to build out that proof of concept toward that. And so each device ran regularly, and we did an interesting measurement and analysis, and all of these charts and data are available in the report. And we published a code repository so that people could sort of look at that code and inspect it and replicate it. And we'll just go through some of the charts. You can see some of the trend lines. Well, one of the things we found was that measuring in institutions that maintain firewalls and active network management is kind of hard. And so you can see in some of these charts that the bandwidth cap right along the trend line. We did find that they were, sort of capping each device at a certain amount in order to properly manage their bandwidth. So it was a fun project to work on. It took a long time. And using measurement lab tools, we have, a way to see a different picture of speed and latency measurements. And this in particular was an interesting one that I want to look at further in the future, which is sort of looking at each of the 5 measurement lab servers that tests were conducted against and seeing. So actually left side is download speeds, minimum RTT for download tests and round trip time on the right for upload tests. And you can see there's a differential between the transit providers for which those, I'm almost out of time. My gosh. So,
Sorry.
Okay, we had challenges, and we made the system better using resin.io, which is a cool thing. And now we just got a subcontract to this grant from IMLS, and we're working with a research colleague at Simmons College to build a better system to do this in libraries. And so this will be a participatory process that we engage with many people in the library and technology communities. And so let us know what your thoughts are on that. And if you want to be involved in some way, help us build something awesome.
Yeah, that is such an interesting and cool project. We already have a bunch of questions coming in. I was wondering if there is pushback against measuring connectivity in schools and libraries at public institutions. Do people say, like, don't bother doing that? Or...
I wouldn't say anybody says don't bother doing that. I think the problem is there's always sort of this challenge of if you're doing measurement, whether or not it's impacting people's use at that point in time. So there's sort of a balance of how much measurement you do at any given moment so that you're not causing a problem by doing the measurement itself. So a lot of the project is actually around scheduling the tests and looking at how you want to orchestrate that measurement and of different tests to understand capacity and what the problems might be. If it's issues of issues of capacity or issues of configuration or routing or the content you're trying to get to or things like that. So no, but yes.
No, but yes. Yeah. And so another question came in about speedtest.net and whether that is something separate, I'm assuming?
That is something separate.
Not public data.
Yeah, none of that data is public. So speedtest.net is run by a company called Ookla, and usually ISPs contract with them to run a measurement server on their network. So when you run a test on speedtest.net, you're actually testing your connectivity to your ISP, not necessarily how well your ISP is connected to the internet. So when you run a measurement lab test, you're actually testing how well your ISP connects you to the internet or to content on the internet.
Now that is a very important distinction. And then there's another question, I think this is Rick in Orange, about debugging peer-to-peer and decentralized stuff in different situations, wondering if anyone's done any work on that. And I think that's a pretty interesting idea. And then he also wants to know if there's a chat community room that he can join online.
Yeah, not that we know of. I think we'd be interested in talking about what that looks like. And part of what Chris and I were thinking about too, is it might be interesting to talk about, like, if there's libraries or groups that are already using DAT, if DAT could be useful in the way that the data is actually transferred and stored locally in a library as part of this project. So that'd be something I think we'd be interested in talking with folks about. For community space, we have a mailing list. I know that's sort of not like hip with the now, and we have, we've been thinking about whether or not to, like, we use Slack as a team, if we could open a channel or cross-bridge that into an IRC room. But definitely shoot us an email and we can figure out ways to connect people better. That's something we are working on.
Yeah, we would love to chat more. And I think a lot of people in the community would be really interested in just keeping abreast of the work that you're doing, particularly with that libraries project. That's cool. Super exciting.
And reach out if you have any follow-up. We'd be happy to talk more.
All right, if you can add the link to the joining the mailing list on line 351, that would be
I'll do that.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just keep it rolling. We're at 11:40. We have 20 minutes left in the call. And as you know, I like to end these calls right on time. So Nakomi, it's you're up with updates on Stencilla.
Hi, everyone. So updates to Stencilla. We finally got a Stencilla Desktop 0.28 release out. It's been a long time coming. It's available for download. It is still a bit buggy, and we're calling it a beta release. So we've started a beta testing program. So anyone who wants to get involved, would love to have people try it out. If you've got a bit of patience for bugs and things, that'd be great. And so that release is really the first of a series of more frequent releases we're hoping to put out over the next few months. So yeah, get in touch if you're interested in being involved in that. The other exciting thing that's happened recently was during the eLife sprint that Naomi just talked about. Daniel Newston, Min Reagan Kelly worked on a integration between Stencilla and Jupyter and Binder. And that's really cool because it means that you can open Stencilla within a Binder instance, and there's a link down there to both the repo, and the bottom link that I put up is actually a link to a Binder. So if you click on that, you'll get a Binder open up with a example Stencilla document that you can play around with. That supports Python cells running in Jupyter kernels, or I think there's also native Stencilla, native R and Python execution context in there now too. So that was really cool. We've been working on those integrations for a while, but what was really great was during that eLife sprint, those guys just jumped on it and actually just got it going. And so it's really good to have some external contributors just push it across the line. The other thing we've been working on is simplifying the approach to how you can write and integrate functions in Stencilla. So the idea there is that people can take existing functions for doing data analysis and visualization that they might have in Python or R and easily make them accessible through a more intuitive visual sort of interface for non-coders. So we've had that for a while, but we've made that a lot easier to do, and so we're hoping to make that part of the next release. We've also been working on updating our website and reinvigorating our blog, so check it out, and if you've got any comments or suggestions, it's really easy to contribute and fix all our spelling mistakes. I think that's it. I'll take any questions if there are any.
All right, that sounds good. Someone is asking about an in-browser Beaker version of Stencilla, whether that's possible.
Yeah, it's something that we've talked about for a while, and we haven't quite done it, but it should be possible. If someone wants to work on that, that'd be great.
So yeah, there's always time for good ideas. looking for contributors. Excellent. Okay, well, if anyone has other questions for Nakomi, you can put them in under line 409. And in the meantime, I think we'll move on to Science Fair. Rick, you're on the call. Where are you? Can we hear you and see you? Yes, there's Rick. Okay. Nope. Don't hear you or see you anymore. That's too bad. He was on the call before. Let's see. So Naomi's asking a question about the Stencilla. So she's asking whether you can imagine sharing Stencilla on DAT via Trackbook. Yes. So I can answer that question. That question has a lot of jargon for people who weren't at the eLife Sprint, but essentially, Project Trackbook is something that Joe and I worked on with a really great group of people at the eLife Sprint. And Trackbook is essentially like a little file management app that allows people to check in a bunch of files, track them with DAT, and it automates encouragement to update methods and metadata associated with all the files. And so there should be no restriction on the type of files or notebooks that you can add. And so I think that might be an interesting way to think about the first step of a DAT integration with Stencilla. Yeah. And Joe put the link, and now Joe put the link here. Can you imagine the code execution in the Trackbook? Not while I'm trying to think about where Rick is. And I feel bad. I feel bad that he hasn't been able to connect. But he has put in an update, and I have been working with him. So I'm just going to try to send him a message, and then I'll just talk. I'll talk his update. What's up with your... Oh, Rick says he's on the call. Can you hear me? We can't hear you. I'm just going to do this eyebrow thing. No, we cannot hear him. I see him chatting in the thing. So he's going to log off and try to rejoin. But in the meantime, you should check out the new Science Fair website is getting a little refresh, and there's now a Gitter chat room to discuss Science Fair stuff. And so for those of you who have been following the project for a little while, hello. Hey, there he is. Okay, I just started saying that you were refreshing the website and you had set up a Gitter room. So that's all. That's as far as I got. Take it away, Rick.
Cool. So I'm actually just going to follow on from that question that Naomi asked. So can you imagine sharing Stencilla notebooks on DAT via Project Trackbook? So in the same way that Beaker is like a browser for the decentralized web, Science Fair is like a science desktop environment for the decentralized web. So we are planning to integrate Stencilla into Science Fair, so it will be possible to like peer-to-peer collaborate on things that you are creating in Stencilla, publish them peer-to-peer, have other people be able to discover them and read them in Science Fair, all over DAT, and in Beaker at the same time. So I'll just go back to the beginning and talk about what Science Fair actually is. This morning I came up with a new tagline for Science Fair, which I'm quite pleased with. So it's the futuristic, fabulous, and free desktop app for working with the scientific literature. And there's a little unicorn at the end, which is important. It's basically a desktop app for doing anything that you might already want to do with the scientific literature. So it's for scientists and students and journalists and science communicators, people like that. And the idea is that you can discover literature that's relevant to things that you're trying to find out about, collect it, organize it, read it, and analyze it. Those are the things that it does right now. So, you know, there are apps that exist for doing this kind of stuff, like Zotero and Mendeley, that are just reference managers. So the first thing that we wanted to reimagine at Science Fair is to take those fairly boring and constrained tools and bring them into the sort of 21st century. So the idea is completely rethink what the user experience should be like, instead of them just basically being old office tool interfaces that have just been reworked for managing documents, like scientific documents. We completely like tried to redesign it from the ground up. So it's basically just it's like having a search box for your entire memory of all the scientific literature that you've ever accessed and all of the scientific literature that exists in the world. It works peer-to-peer, so publishers and university libraries can host material in the same way that they do now, but by also running a science fair node, they can be part of a peer-to-peer network, and then everybody else who's downloading and using that material is joining the network and helping to see that stuff. So it makes the whole global distribution of scientific knowledge much more robust. And this was not possible before DAT, basically. So I have to say that DAT was the seed that allowed the whole idea of science fair to come to life. One of my favorite things to do if I have a bit of spare time is to just sit down and pick a random aspect of society and think, what if we rebuilt this using DAT? It's a really fun thing to do. And you can always come up with new fun software. You can do that. Anyway, so we built this prototype last year and released it. And that's kind of cool. It just has one data source, which is eLife. And it kind of just showcases a few of the cool technologies that we wanted to integrate into the tool. Things like the lens reader, which is built by the same team who have been helping out with Stencilla and building the interface library that's used in Stencilla. And that means that instead of having to read PDFs, you get this really nice, rich, interactive way of using scientific articles. And it also means you can do stuff like text and data mining. Whilst you're reading an article, you can have annotations and you can have people collaboratively correcting the scientific literature, or you can have corrections showing up in real time on your own collection of the scientific literature, all that kind of stuff. So at the moment, we've got the bare building blocks in place. We've got like all of those core pieces of technology, and we've got it working quite nicely on DAT. We're migrating to HyperDB because what HyperDB does is allow us to do real, true decentralized search. So if you imagine that there are like thousands or tens of thousands of scientific institutions around the world, and they each have part of the scientific literature on their servers. Well, if you have all of them collectively as part of a data source in Science Fair, you don't have to have any of the papers on your computer for you to be able to search every article in the world using HyperDB. So that has become possible for the first time to search in like a completely globally distributed database of anything using HyperDB. So Macintosh has gone from the call, I think, but he deserves some credit for like solving a massive problem that's going to change the world. So this is just one like way that we can use that, is that people don't have to have the whole scientific literature on their computer. You don't need Google Scholar. You don't need any one company to have it in one place. As long as everyone's part of this peer-to-peer network, you can search everything that's in the network distributed around the world, and then only download the stuff that you're interested in, and then you join the network and start seeding it back up again. So where we are right now is we've got this prototype, and in the next few weeks, I got sick, and unfortunately I was the only person developing this, so it was a classic bus factor problem where the project stalled for ages. However, I've been revived in the last couple of weeks, so I'm now starting back up on it. In the next few days, there'll be a release that just fixes a few bugs. In the next few weeks, we should have millions of papers available in the tool, so it'll actually start to be useful. But then in the long term, so right now it's just kind of a cool thing that showcases some nice technologies. In the long term, it's got the modest goal of completely replacing the entire scientific publishing infrastructure and eliminating all publishers and other people who seek to profit from public knowledge. So the way that it plans to do that is by providing peer-to-peer community-driven alternatives for basically all of the processes that require institutional trust in the existing system, and you replace those with cryptographic trust and like real communities of people who build up online communities that can then be used to form things like journals or conferences or classes, study groups, that kind of thing. All that stuff can be done, and again, it can only be done now because of HyperDB. So because of the way that you can have lots of people all cryptographically verified as members of a community and able to add and consume things in a peer-to-peer network. That is the basis for completely redesigning lots of things, but one of those things can be the scientific publishing industry.
So science fair, I'm going to cut you off because we're almost out of time, but there are a couple of questions. Don't be sorry. It happens to literally every person on this call, because otherwise we would just chat for 2 hours and we all have to get back to work. So the
questions.
Yeah, on line 460.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so will science fair. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm emceeing over your emceeing.
All right. So, Rick, will science fair be able to import BibTeX, some BibTeX app? And I don't know what that is, so I don't.
Yep. So BibTeX is a format that you can store citations in. So science fair will be able to do that and do everything else with every other format of citations, and it'll be able to work as a reference manager and all those kind of things. But the key thing about it is that we're building the core technology in the app, and then in a couple of releases time, the idea is to make it a place where anybody who has an idea for how you could do cool stuff with the scientific literature or improve the app will be able to release apps within Science Fair. So if you've ever used Atom, which is a text editor which has a package manager inside it, Science Fair within a few releases will be a bit like that, in that there'll be a way for you to discover extra functionality that other people have created and incorporate it into your own local version of Science Fair. And so if you want to have BibTeX functionality, you'll just download the BibTeX plugin, you'll search for it and download it. And similarly, if you're like a cancer researcher, for example, you can get together with other cancer researchers and curate a bunch of plugins that are particularly useful for cancer researchers, and then all the cancer researchers in the world will be able to instantly download like the perfect cancer research desktop environment. And it's just because the difference between what we have now and what will be possible when this is ready is that right now there are loads of people who are making really cool little tools that help solve small problems in science or in like the literature or whatever, but they're all like dotted around the internet or on GitHub on different sites, and there's no way to like integrate them all together. So the kind of eventual goal of this is to create a space for anyone who wants to experiment with these things to be able to bring those things to an audience in a coherent way, and for users to be able to access them.
Awesome.
So yes, to any functionality that you can imagine, yes, it will be possible.
All right. So Rick, there are more questions in there, but we only have 3 minutes left, and I wanted to do a little wrap up. So I'm going to ask you to answer those questions offline in the Etherpad while we wrap up.
Can I answer one real quickly, because it's the coolest one?
Oh, okay.
Can you run Science Fair in the browser?
Okay, but I'm going to stop you in 1 minute.
Okay. So can you run Science Fair in the browser? Yes. And this ties together lots of things in this call, right? Because you can run it in Beacon browser. You will be able to run Stencilla in Beacon browser. You can open DAP things in Beacon browser. The peer-to-peer web, as at least represented by this community, is all interoperable from the ground up. So Science Fair data sources, you can literally just open them in Beacon browser and read the scientific literature in there. It's the same, it's just standards compliance stuff underneath, all built on the DAP protocol. So yes, and it's because DAP's awesome.
And now I'm cutting you off because it's time to say thank you to all of our amazing speakers, including you, Rick. Thank you to Rick and Nakomi and Macintosh, who's now offline, I think. Thank you, Naomi and Georgia, for showing up and talking about your work. And thank you, Hugh, for jumping in last minute and talking about zombies a little bit. and real use cases for peer-to-peer stuff offline. So I would like to, before we end the call, I would like to remind everyone on here to just come up all the way to the top of the Etherpad to line 12 and make sure that your name is there, because we are not going to share your name with anyone, obviously, but it makes us feel good to know that a bunch of people came to the call. And if you are interested, if you like email, you can join our mailing list on line 65, and you can join the Measurement Lab mailing list on line 355. And so that's one great way to keep in touch with us. You can also always find Code for Science and Society on Twitter. You can also find us on Fritter, which is the Beaker browser Twitter clone, and in all kinds of fun places. So next time, on the next call, we will have an update from that team who's building Cabal, and a lot of other interesting things, including updates from our sponsored projects. And if there's nothing else that I'm forgetting, and this is Joe's cue to say, Danielle, you have forgotten something. No? Okay. If there's nothing else, then we can close it at 11:59. So everyone gets to go on with the rest of their day. But it's been really great to see all of your chats and get all the speakers on the call and hear what everyone's up to. So thanks, everybody. And goodbye.